Oh, sorry about that. I thought I got both of them. I'll start again. My name is Keith McNutt, and I'm the Executive Director of the Entertainment Community Fund's Western Region. And on behalf of everyone at the fund and our chair, the chair of our board, Annette Benning, I want to welcome you to this webinar, and we hope that you will find it very useful and helpful. The fund's mission is to help people, anyone who works in performing arts and entertainment anywhere in the country, as a safety net in times of need or crisis, and to help build more stability and resiliency into a lifetime in the performing arts. We are extremely grateful to this coalition of 17 unions, guilds, associations, and nonprofit partners who have all banded together to provide this series of webinars to all of you as you are going through this current crisis. Collectively, our hearts are with you, and we will remain with you, providing resources and information as we continue to go through this crisis, this healing, this recovery, how long it takes. We will all be here. We've all been here for a long time, and we will continue to be here, identifying new ways that we can help. So I want to turn it over. We have a lot of information to cover, so I don't want to belabor this any longer, just to say welcome. Please let your friends know that we're doing these activities. We will continue to do webinars as we identify partners like today's focus on disaster unemployment that we think a broad audience of our community will find helpful. So now I'm going to turn it over to Tina Hokum, the Entertainment Community Fund's Director of Social Services, who will introduce our speakers and start the conversation. Tina?
Great. Thanks, Keith. Thank you. Hi, everyone. As Keith mentioned, I'm Tina Hokum. I'm the Director of Social Services for the Entertainment Community Fund. We are so glad you could join us today for our webinar on understanding disaster unemployment. I will facilitate our conversation with a variety of speakers from the Employment Development Department of California, which administers numerous benefits, including disaster unemployment. Before we get into our content today, I'm going to quickly describe how we're going to use our webinar space. So on the bottom of your toolbar of your screen, you will see that we have closed caption as an option. To utilize this feature, you need to click the closed caption icon, and then you'll begin to see the text scroll. Also on the bottom toolbar, you will see the chat icon. Click on that icon to see the chat bar come up alongside of your screen. Today, we're using that chat feature to share resources such as links and PDFs. Please know that you can cut and paste information from the chat into another Word document, into the notes section on your phone, or gather it in an email to send to yourself later. Following today's session, we will be sending everyone the information we placed in the chat in a follow-up email. So you are invited just to listen and participate. You can submit questions by clicking the Q&A icon on the bottom. If you want to submit an anonymous question, it is recommended to click the icon, click anonymous first before you begin to type, so that you don't accidentally submit a question with your name appearing. We will curate questions as they come in. We will make every effort to answer as many questions as we can. We have over 125 of us attending today, so we will do our best to get through as many questions as we can. If you really like a question that someone else has submitted, please feel free to upvote that question by using the reaction button and giving it a thumbs up. That will help us curate what to answer first. You'll see the agenda in our chat. Our format today will be to cover and review a section of content, then open up for questions related to that section only, and then we're going to move on to the next section. Lastly, this webinar will be recorded and available on our Entertainment Community Fund client portal and website, as well as it will be distributed to all of our community partners. We will share the recording and send resources by the end of the week. We wanted to take a moment to highlight a few things before we begin. If you missed our last webinar with FEMA and the Small Business Administration, that is available on our website and our client portal. The deadline to apply for FEMA is March 10th. The Entertainment Community Fund is offering a weekly space called Recovering Together. It happens every Tuesday, noon from 1:30. This is a drop-in space. It's a virtual gathering for our community to come together and connect and listen and share with one another as we navigate the phases of recovery. So if you'd like to join us, we hope you do. The link is in the chat. It's also accessible through our website and our client portal. We also wanted to call your attention to a few emergency assistance funds that either have an upcoming deadline to apply or they are new and just coming on board recently. So the LA Region Small Business and Worker Relief Fund directly supports workers, small businesses, and nonprofits impacted by the wildfire and wind storms. The deadline to apply is at the end of this week, so February 24th. The link is in the chat. Please review their website for eligibility and to access the application. Also, Restaurant Cares is an organization distributing basic fund grants. This fund is for any members of our community who happen to work in the food and beverage industry as their secondary source of income. You can check out their website for their eligibility and to access the application. Lastly, the LA County Household Relief Grant Fund is opening applications next week. So February 26th, and it will be open until March 12th. You can visit the website to understand the scope of their grants, the eligibility, and to access the application. Again, we will be sending a follow-up email with all of the resources we talk about today. Before we welcome our guests, we wanted to emphasize that all of the community partners participating in today's event are offering a wide range of support and services, some of which include emergency financial assistance, mental health support, and practical help connecting to resources. If you are feeling overwhelmed or in need of some support or help, we hope that you reach out. So without further delay, let's welcome our speakers from the Employment Development Department, Ken Gomez, the Deputy Division Director of Workforce Service Branch Region 2, and Cesar Valderez, Deputy Division Chief Workforce Service Branch Region 1, Kush Siri and Solma Machika, both of whom are employment program representatives. We are excited that you're being with us today. So we're going to start with a PowerPoint presentation. We're going to review an overview of EDD. I know many of us are familiar with EDD and have used it previously, but we're going to start with an overview in case there are some benefits that EDD provide that you may not be aware of. So Ken, please come on and let's jump right in.
Thank you, Tina, for the nice introduction. As Tina mentioned, I'm Ken Gomez. I'm the Deputy Division Chief for the State of California's Workforce Services Branch. Region 2, my region spans from Malibu in the north all the way down to my hometown of Long Beach in the south. I'm joined also by my counterpart for region number 1, and that would be Cesar Valladares. And his region starts around Ventura County and goes all the way up to Salinas. And so we have to cover a lot of territory here. But we just want to, first of all, thank our gracious hosts at the Entertainment Community Fund for giving us and indulging us with 90 minutes of your time today so that we can go over a lot of the different programs and benefits offered by the Employment Development Department. We certainly, number one, do not expect you to become experts overnight on what we offer. We don't want those heads spinning tonight, but we do want those wheels churning so that you know at least where to start and that we are hopefully going to be one of your first choices as far as your number one starting point. We do want this to be interactive, so there'll be opportunities following each major section to ask those burning questions that you may have. And without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and get started. So if I may see the PowerPoint, that would be great. So as Tina mentioned, we're talking today about programs that the EDD offers in our disaster-related services. On our next slide, we're going to talk a little about what we're going to cover today. So we're going to talk about disaster and employment assistance, known fondly as DUA, not DUI, but DUA. And we're going to share some more information about our programs that we offer year-round. We'll share information on how to apply for benefits, and hopefully you'll be able to do this all online from the comfort of your home. And I think the next part we're going to cover is really important because you need to know what to expect after you filed your claim. You know, EDD likes to communicate with people, and we do that now via text and email and regular mail. So we'll talk more about that later. We're also excited to share some additional resources that we have for you for in-person services. And of course, the Q&A following each of our sections. But I just want to remind you, because we do respect everyone's privacy, the EDD has a very strict policy about protecting everyone's personal and confidential information. So during the Q&A, we will not be able to answer questions that are specific to a claim. We can talk about that more offline later, but for now, we're going to keep it to basic questions so that everyone can benefit. Okay, so I think I would like to start by kind of demystifying the EDD. As you know, people think of us as unemployment, but we're really much more than that. We were established in 1935 as a result of the Great Depression as the Department of Employment. And then we changed names in 1974 to the Employment Development Department. We have 10 branches, and 6 of those are really of a support to make the operation run smoothly. But the ones that you'd probably be most familiar with would be unemployment insurance, UI, disability insurance, who also oversee our paid family leave program, which was the very first program of its nature in the United States, celebrating 20 years. We have workforce services, which is where Caesar and I work, and our job here is to connect job seekers with jobs and employers with good qualified candidates. And we'll go into each branch in which they do more. We also have our tax branch, and I've added them as well. They support the business communities. They are responsible for collecting payroll taxes, etc. And they're also a very good resource for information. Okay, so I'm going to give you a very high level overview of the benefit programs that we offer. These are the core programs. Unemployment. This is when you are out of work due to no fault of your own. And in times of disaster, we have our disaster unemployment assistance program. And this program is specifically designed for people that would not normally qualify for unemployment or disability. Of course, disability is fairly self-explanatory. It's when you're not able to work due to an illness or an injury. And lastly, we have paid family leave, PFL as we call it. That's used to bond with a new child, care for a family member. You could support, if you have someone in the military that's being deployed overseas, that program can be used for that as well. And we'll go into more specifics as to what each program covers, along with their eligibility requirements and how to apply. So let's start with the most familiar one to all of you out there, which is unemployment. And this does provide temporary partial income replacement when you're unemployed or have had your hours reduced due to no fault of your own. So the key here also is not just being out of work, period, but if you've had your hours significantly reduced, again, at no fault of your own. There are some weekly eligibility requirements that you must meet to get paid benefits. They are being physically able to work, available to work, and actively seeking work. And when we say actively seeking work, we mean a lot of things. It's going through your network, it's going through your union, it's going through, LinkedIn, it's going to a job board, different employment agencies, going through your agent. That is considered looking for work. And then keep in mind that unemployment is paid for by your employers through payroll taxes. On the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about kind of the basics of how UI works. Now, I'm going to go over the normal parameters, and then I'll cover some waivers for the wildfire survivors. Unemployment pays between $40 and $450 a week. And that claims are offered up to 26 weeks of benefit payments. The claim is valid for 1 year from the date that it's open, and we always start a regular UI claim on the Sunday of the week that you file. The other stipulation is you must certify for benefits every 2 weeks, and that's to let us know that either you still need benefits or you don't. So if we don't hear from you, we assume that you no longer need our services. One thing I will share with you, because there is such a wide range of the weekly benefit amount ranging from $40 at one end to the maximum of 450, we have a wonderful UI benefit calculator on our website. And our website's been recently refined. So all you need to do is just go into the search engine and type in UI benefit calculator, and that'll appear. For your reference, to get that higher amount of 450, your highest quarterly earnings over the last 4 to 5 completed quarters must exceed $16,674. Again, I would refer you to our online calculator. Again, these are estimates. So now that you know about the kind of basics during non-disaster time, what we have devised for our folks here in Southern California is, number one, UI normally has a 7-day waiting period. And that's because a lot of people get reemployed within that first week. However, because of the situation in Southern California, we have waived the waiting period for claims filed between January 5 of this year and the 12th of July. So keep that in mind, the waiting period would not apply. We also, depending on what your last day worked is, even though you might be applying today after our webinar, if your last day of work was, say, the 6th of January, we can request that your claim start as early as the 12th of January and make it retroactive, even if you apply later. Okay, so those are the basics for unemployment. So now that you are masters of that program, we're going to move on to disaster and employment assistance. This program is actually modeled after the UI program, but it has some tweaks to it so that we can actually help people in time of need. This program supports those who are impacted by a disaster. You don't necessarily have to live in the fire zone, but your employment has to be impacted by the disaster, such as the sound studio where you normally would record has burnt to the ground, or you live in an area where you can no longer commute to your place of business, or your clients lived in an impacted fire zone area. We also have designed this program especially for those who would not be eligible for regular unemployment benefits. And this includes our entrepreneurs, our small business owners, our 1099 gig workers, and those people who have exhausted their regular UI benefits. We know that a lot of people that are in the industry have possibly a claim that they've already opened in the last year, but gee, maybe they've gone through the 26 weeks already. Not a problem. They would then be eligible to apply for the DUA program, which would then give them up to an additional 26 weeks worth of benefits. So these are some of the provisions that we have for DUA. So again, on the next slide, just to reiterate, it's available to anyone who was unemployed or self-employed and lived or worked or was scheduled to work in the disaster area at the time of the disaster. You qualify for the program if, because of the disaster has created an issue with not having a place to work any longer. Maybe the commute is impenetrable and you can't get to your workplace, or perhaps the workplace was damaged. And lastly, DUA covers those individuals who can't work because of an injury sustained as a result of a disaster. So that's an important thing to keep in mind, guys. If you don't qualify for regular disability insurance, your go-to then or default would then be DUA. So let's talk a little bit more about the specifics of DUA. Again, as I mentioned, it does follow some of the same patterns and criteria as the regular UI program. Again, we are waiving the waiting period, which is good. One thing that I'm going to hit up front before I go into more is that you need to apply by the 10th of March. So mark this date down, make a mental note. But I would encourage you, if you're out of work now, to not wait, but to go ahead and apply now. So the way you would apply is pretty easy. The fastest, most convenient way is usually online through our system called UI Online. You can also apply by phone, and we have a special number for victims of the wildfires. There's the old-fashioned fax or mail way, which we really don't recommend because it takes longer. And one thing I will add, and we'll get involved in this more later in the presentation, is we do have disaster resource centers set up in both Altadena and in West Los Angeles, where you can file a UI claim or a DUI claim in person and speak to a representative face-to-face. So again, no waiting period. The DUA program has a minimum weekly benefit amount of $186 per week. and that's based on a formula. However, you can, if you provide your income verification for the calendar year 2024, we can look at your earnings to see if we can increase it up to as high as $450 per week. Again, it's up to 26 weeks of benefits. Sound familiar? Claims begin on the Sunday of the week you file. And again, you have to certify for benefits every 2 weeks. And what we recommend is if you have a UI Online account, please certify online. You can do it on UI Online mobile or your regular desktop. You can do EDD Telecert. That's an option if you don't have access to a computer or internet. And then, of course, the old-fashioned way is the mail way, but that will surely delay your payments. So let's talk a little bit now about how you're going to apply. And as I've alluded to, there's multiple ways to do this, but I want to go a little more into the specifics. First of all, if you need assistance by phone, we're open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., except for state holidays and weekends. The numbers on your screen will also be on a handout in the chat pod. There's a special line for English speakers and one for Spanish. And then we also have interpretive services for over 150 languages. So regardless of what language you feel comfortable conducting business in, we will be able to assist you. One of the things that I always recommend to anyone, and even my own staff, is to set up a MyEDD account. This is going to be your portal or your gateway to our benefit programs, which would be unemployment, UI, DUA, disability insurance, and paid family leave. And as you know, state employees, when we get sick or injured, we can apply for DI. We do it right through MyEDD. And it's really easy, and I'll walk you through some of the processes on how to get that account set up later on. You can also apply, as I mentioned, fax or mail, but it's really not recommended because it only delays the process. But if that's all that's available to you, then by all means, whatever you feel most comfortable with, we will certainly be able to assist you. So on the next slide, what I would like to do is spend just a little time talking about MyEDD. For those of you that have been a previous customer, it used to be called the Benefits Portal Online. Now we're rebranding everything. We're going to a brand new computer system in a few years, and it'll even be more intuitive and better than it is today. So really very simple to set up your MyEDD account. All you need is a simple email address and to create a password, and it's all very intuitive. You get started at myedd.edd.ca.gov or by going to our general website and just typing in MyEDD, and it'll walk you right through it. So the way you do this is you apply, first of all, to get that credential, as we call it, to get you into the portal, which is your gateway to our benefit programs. Once you are into that portal, then you have an option to select the program that best suits your needs. It would either be unemployment insurance, that would be for if you have want to file a UI or a DUA claim. SDI Online, which is for folks that need to file disability or for paid family leave. And then the one that most people don't really like is Benefit Payments Online. It's actually Benefit Overpayments Online. And this is where we can help you with any sort of adjustments that may need to be taken. They can help you set up a payment plan, as well as there are some waivers depending on your financial circumstances. But all that is online. So now that you know how to file a claim, we want to give you some tips on how not to get caught up in the system, okay? So one thing you're going to learn is, because we take your personal information and protecting it very seriously, you're going to have to prove who you are in order to get benefits. So when you start to file your UI or your DUA claim, you're going to be introduced to an entity called ID.me. And they're going to ask you for information and to maybe take a selfie and to do a few other things. One thing that we do ask you, and this is very important, is to be really clear on those screening questions. So what we ask, number one, is one of the questions states, are you unemployed or working reduced hours as a direct result of a recent disaster in California? You would answer yes. And this tells our system to look for, would they be eligible for regular UI or DUA? So we need to know that you're out of work because of a disaster. The other thing that we really stress here is regardless how you're paid, if it's W-2, if it's 1099, whatever, we want you to report all earnings that you received during 2024. That'll help us determine what your maximum weekly benefit amount will be. And lastly, we always like to ask our customers how they like to get paid. We have three methods. We have a direct deposit to the financial institution of your choice. We also have a prepaid debit card through the Money Network. And then we have the old-fashioned, we'll mail you a check, which again, we try not to go that route because we want to get you your benefit payments faster and sooner than later. One thing I will share with you, even though we have streamlined the application process, you will be asked some questions that you may not have information readily available to answer. If that's the case, it's not a big deal. The system will bookmark where you left off, and you have up until Saturday night to complete that application. If you wait until a minute after midnight on Sunday, all that data goes away. So please, if you're going to be filing online, make sure that you get all that taken care of by midnight on Saturday so that the information that you started with is retained and then part of your submission to the EDD. All right. So at this point, I have my coworkers and my peers from the unemployment insurance branch, and I think this is where we might want to take a short break and answer, and they might want to answer some questions that you may have.
That's great. Thank you, Ken, so much. So we do have a few questions that have come in related to the section you just covered. So one of our participants is wondering, they work as a film editor, and this probably is not just film editors, but many people, people that work in different trades in our industry. I work as a film editor. I haven't worked in 14 months, right? My unemployment ran out. Am I eligible for new benefits? So that's a question around, right, my old claim, right, the claim that I've exhausted my claim, am I eligible to apply for disaster unemployment?
I can take that. So, depending on when the claim was exhausted, it would determine on that. If your claim is exhausted but not ended, each unemployment insurance claim has a 1-year life. So if you filed a regular unemployment insurance claim, it has exhausted, you can most likely potentially be eligible for a DUA claim, disaster unemployment assistance. If, let's say, that claim has ended, then go ahead, please file a claim. Depending on the situation, it could be we call it IENE, invalid no earnings claim, meaning you don't have a W-2 wages or bona fide wages. You're maybe self-employed. You still want to file a claim. And once that has happened, it might be an invalid claim. But because, like Ken said, guys, please mark that question that you are unemployed due to a disaster. If you're calling it in, I didn't tell you guys, 8 a.m. is a good time to call. It's a good time to call. Going back to when you mark that unemployed due to a disaster, please, if you can specify which fire you are affected by, even better. Let's say Palisades, Eaton, you can mark that on that, which is great because it tells us that this particular fire, we call it a DR number. We have to assign that on the back end. And that's when all the information is sent to a particular office so they can file your DUA claim if you are self-employed. But it all goes case to case, but please file your claim as soon as possible.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Kush. So just to reiterate, right, many in our community work as an independent contractor, right? And what we're hearing is if you work as an independent contractor, you may be eligible for benefits. So the suggestion is to apply. Our next question is just that. I'm a freelancer and I was in between jobs when the fires hit. Would I be eligible for, traditional unemployment or disaster unemployment. So I know you guys know many of our community, right, are looking for work every week, every day. So the fires have impacted our ability to look for jobs, right? So I think everyone's curious to understand if looking for work qualifies for being impacted.
So absolutely a great question. If absolutely you have been impacted, even if you don't live in a disaster area, but you were scheduled to work in a disaster area and you were impacted, you're no longer able to work there as scheduled, you may be eligible to qualify. And what we would ask is that you file an application. And just to clarify, there is only one application for UI unemployment. You can either file online, by telephone, by fax, or by mail. When you file the application, then EDD has to determine, is it a regular claim or is it a disaster unemployment assistance claim? How we can determine that is based on your answers. So we want you to just respond on there. If you have been affected by a disaster, mark it on your application, and then that will mark it as a potential disaster unemployment assistance claim that EDD can move forward. And so that does apply even if you have not been, and you're not traditionally eligible for the regular unemployment assistance program, please apply. And we will ask you for where have you worked in the last 18 months? We just want to know as best as you recall that information, even if you were a 1099 gig worker only, or if you're both 1099 gig worker and W-2 employee.
Thank you so much. Our next question is, if I'm receiving Social Security, but I'm still working, am I eligible to apply for unemployment?
You are. Yeah. Social Security, everyone, is non-deductible income, meaning, let's say, I'm going to give you example. Let's say your weekly benefit amount is $450 and you're getting Social Security $1,000 a month. You will still be entitled for your complete $450 of your weekly benefit amount, but please report that on the certification forms in the other income that you receive X amount of dollars as your Social Security, and we will take into that account and it will be considered a non-deductible. Going back to if you're claiming Social Security, then we go back to same thing. Please apply, depending on whether this will be a regular UI claim or a potentially a DUA claim. That will be determined case to case, but please apply, and Social Security does not change anything.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the clarity. Another question is there any way to get unemployment after losing a job through a loan out corporation? So I'm not, that was the question. So I guess maybe they're working through a loan out corporation and they became unemployed. Does that fall under that independent contractor?
I would believe so. And if they have any questions, still apply. If they're their own self-employed and if it's a limited liability corporation, that's okay. Apply. Please apply because it can apply to anybody with, depending on the type of employment that you have previously.
Wonderful. And then we had some specific questions just about applying as an independent contractor using those 1099s. So our first question was, when I apply for EDD, do I submit both my W-2s and my 1099s? Is it okay to submit both of those to meet the income threshold?
That is correct. You will be submitting both. And when you're applying, online, so depending, let's say if you have W-2 wages, but you are self-employed too. If you have W-2 wages or bona fide wages, then your claim becomes as a regular UI claim. Depending on anywhere from $40 to $450, whatever your weekly benefit amount will be, if that claim gets exhausted, then you could be potentially eligible for a DUA claim. Remember, at this point, the DUA is available only till July 12th, 2025, from January 12th to July 12th, 26 weeks. We don't know in the future, what we've seen during pandemic, those dates keep on going, they keep on changing. We don't know, but the information, what we have right now is till July 12th. And like Ken said, the deadline for that to file your DUA claim is March 10th. But you can file your regular UI claim anytime. But if you need assistance, please apply as soon as possible. Please do that.
Wonderful. We also have, well, I'm going to do this one first. So I just want to reiterate again, because I think this is where a lot of people are. They're working as a freelancer, right? They're not directly impacted by the fire. They don't live in those specific fire zones, but their ability to work, right? The potential hiring of jobs, right, has been affected. And we're a lot of people just asking for clarity, you know, does DUA apply to me? Should I be applying if that's the scenario?
Correct. The same scenario would apply if, let's say, you had a contract that you had coming up with an employer there in the area. Yes, this is because we're talking about a disaster affected assistance claim. So yes, if you were going to travel through there, if you were going to work there, maybe not directly impacted in the sense of you live there and you had some property damage, but in the sense of you were not able to commit the employment. Now, in that case, with the application, in any given case, the application will always ask, when was your last day of physical work? So whenever you physically work, whether that was before, right before or right now, you're currently affected, you still may apply. So please go ahead and apply. The application will always ask when your last day of work was. And I do want to also say one thing, for those like contracts that maybe you were paid out, we're not talking about when you last received payment. We're talking about when you last physically worked, just to confirm that. We do want to know when you last physically worked, whenever you last received payment. It's not so much what's asked on the application as far as the physical last day of work is so important.
Wonderful. So I'm just going to say that out loud. So what I'm hearing, tell me if I'm right, Zula, is that it's the day you worked, right? Your day of employment. It's not the day you got your check,
Correct.
right? The day you got your payment from your agent, your manager, the day that came in, it's the day that you worked. So that would be on it. Perfect. Thank you so much. We also have a lot of questions pouring in from people that are actually logging into ED right now, right? As you guys are talking and trying to follow along. So great job, everybody. But they're saying they're getting a code that's saying their claim has maxed out, if I'm understanding correctly. So what could you give us some tips maybe of what or strategies could you offer?
So if your claim is exhausted, so there are two things. One, we're going to just use as an example, so just so you can understand. Let's say you filed your claim July of 2024. Like as I stated earlier, your claim has a life of 52 weeks. It's valid till July of 2025. You might have taken maybe all of your benefits, 26 weeks, claim is exhausted, meaning claim has a balance of 0. But it has not ended because it's valid till July of 2025. So potentially you could be eligible for a DUA claim. And once again, I cannot reiterate, please, on that application, like Ken said, please mark it. If you are affected by the disaster, please mark it yes and specify which fire. What happens is once you submit that form and application, then we send it forward and then potentially a DUA claim can be filed. If let's say your claim is ended, you filed it, let's call it January of 2024, and it ended January or December 31st, 2024. You can file a new claim depending on, again, if you have bona fide wages. If not, still file a claim. But if you're a freelancer, you're self-employed, 1099, report those wages on your application. Very important, guys. So let's say you don't have bona fide, you don't have a W-2, but you most likely now you know how much net income you made in 2024, which possibly you're going to be reporting it on your tax return. Report that, because your DUA benefits will be calculated with your yearly self-employment income, net income. So it's very important.
Thank you, Kush. So I just want to clarify. So what's happening for folks, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly, is they're clicking on that link, right? They're being asked to add their account, right? Their login account. So when they log in, they're saying that their claim has exhausted. So are we hearing you correctly that then that would be an indicator they need to open a new claim? They need to file a new claim? Is that the strategy?
If there could be a few things. So, sometimes the screen shows, even some of them might see that, oh, you don't have no wages. Oh, please continue with the extension. Maybe they filed it during pandemic. They need to file a new claim.
Okay.
If they know that the claim is exhausted, still file a new claim. If the claim has not ended, still file a new claim, but definitely file a new claim. And same again, there are different ways they can file a claim. MyADD UI Online is recommended. If not, then call the disaster dedicated line, but please file your claim.
Okay, so great. So for some of us that are trying right now, and it sounds like we're getting a little bit in a loop, right? You can try to open a new claim. It sounds like that's one option. If you are really getting stuck, there's a couple of options that's been shared. There's the specific phone line, dedicated disaster claims. So you might need to go old fashioned, right? Get on the phone. I did hear Kush give a little tip that it's easier to call in the morning, right? So try to get up and get going right at 8 o'clock. Also, can't highlight enough the disaster recovery centers, which we are going to go through more in a couple of slides. This is the opportunity to go to meet with somebody and to talk through any specific questions. So I know that's a little bit of a drive, but if you're really getting stuck and frustrated, can't highlight that enough.
And I do have a little quick tip as well on that note. We have our UI Online platform, which is amazing for actually asking specific claim related questions. While we can't address specific questions on this platform and session today, but if you're on your UI Online portal and you go to the contact section within your EDD portal, and then you choose one of the drop-down menu options, you can actually type up a message and say, hey, can you tell me if I'm eligible? Especially if you've been affected by disaster, you can just please note that so you don't have any question about that, whether you have applied or not, and you're just like not quite sure, you can always get a written response from EDD as another method, and that way it's securely sent through your account, and the agent is going to know right away who it is and give you an accurate response about maybe what action might be needed. As Kush said, you might be eligible to apply for a new claim soon, or you might be eligible for the DUA, disaster unemployment assistance claim. But if something is not moving along, 2 weeks ago by, you don't see anything in the mail, you are welcome to send that message online. That would be my biggest tip for using that platform, especially when you're logged in.
Okay, great. So to use the online chat feature and to submit your questions. So yes, so many are kind of saying my claim is open, but when I open that old claim, I'm not seeing the option to choose DUA, right? Because I don't know for the old claim, right? DUA probably wasn't on board. So so that might be a situation people needed to call.
So you can reopen the claim. If it's letting them reopen the claim, they can reopen the claim.
Okay.
If they have balance on their current claim, then they have to exhaust their regular claim first to be potentially eligible for DUA. If they have exhausted their current claim, let's say back in December they exhausted, and it has not ended it's not going to end till July of 2025, submit a new application, please. And state that we are affected. I posted a link. There are those dedicated phone lines, which is for the disaster, but you can always call the regular unemployment insurance phone line also, which is 1-800-300-5616. I posted that number also in the chat. But definitely call if you reopen the claim. Let's say they reopen the claim and they don't see nothing happening in next 2 weeks. No harm calling, get a clarification, and we are here on the phones to help you. We can guide you what's missing, what needs to be done. But yeah, please reopen or file a new claim as soon as possible.
Okay, great. I did just have a couple of other eligibility questions that have come up. So wondering if you could speak to, do I need to be a US citizen to apply for benefits, for UI benefits? Like who's eligible as far as the workforce?
That's a really great question. And Whenever there is an application for unemployment submitted, part of the application does ask if you are currently a US citizen or a national of the US, but if you have a valid work authorization, that is okay too. Actually, to just get a little bit more into detail, the application specifically does ask if you were legally entitled to work in the US in the last 19 months. And as long as you provide that information on the application, you should be good to go.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you for those
Great
specifics.
question.
Okay, I'm looking at, oh, looks like there was a lot. I'm a freelancer and did a partial withdrawal from my retirement account, and I have received a 1099. Would this money count as income for EDD?
So the retirement, you know, the 401k, depending on, yeah, it's an income. You know, sometimes people take the money out sooner. It is considered an income, which will be for the tax purposes. In terms of a 401k, they have to report it, and then we'll have to look into more. What kind of income was it? Did they put money into this? You know, the pension, whatever it is, we'll have to look into more into case by case.
Okay.
What kind of income was it exactly?
Okay, great. And then I'm not sure if we should cover this now or if it's down a couple more slides. I'm sorry, I can't remember the run of show. But I know there's always specific questions about residual payments, how to track residual payments, and how to what do I do if I have multiple, right, employers and multiple things to enter? And I wondered if this was the best time to speak to that, or if that shows up in a couple of slides.
Well, this would be a good time.
Okay.
We ask for that information twice, once when you file the claim, because we really want to give you the highest amount possible. So we need to know everyone that you've worked for so that we can make sure that you get the best benefit available to you. We also, when you certify for benefits, which we'll get to later in the program, we ask for similar information to help us determine if it's deductible from your weekly benefit amount. So one of the reasons we do this, you guys, is because we want to make sure that people get what they're entitled to. And when you file a claim, you'll get an award letter and it'll tell you all how we calculated your amount. Let's say you're expecting 450, but you only got 350. Well, it will show how it was computed. And you might say, you know, EDD, I worked for this other company that's not on here. And it could be because the employer may have been late in reporting wages. We don't know. So that's your opportunity to appeal that amount of that decision and send us pay stubs from that employer so that we can bring you up to par at the 450 and make any retroactive payments you'd be eligible for. So
Okay.
I'm going to go into what to expect after you file a claim. I'll go a little bit more into these notices and things that you'll be getting, but yes, it's always good to list all. I know it's a lot of information, folks, a lot, you know, but we do want to make sure that you get the highest benefit that you're eligible for. And
Right.
you know, it's not like the Spanish Inquisition, but you know, close to it with all those questions.
Great. And so the other thing, a really wonderful feature that is available to you guys, we're going to post it in the chat. It's also going to be in the follow-up email that we're sending out, is there are these really wonderful specific YouTube videos specifically related to the entertainment industry community on how to submit your claim if you received a residual, there's a bunch of how-to videos. So we will be passing those along to everybody. And there's also a one sheet that Ken had referenced earlier that provides a lot of specificity on how to literally fill out the form, and just a nod to how important it is to read it, watch it before you begin, because you want to do it accurately so your claim doesn't get paralyzed. But is there anything, Kush, Zulma, that we should know about entering residuals? Like I know sometimes, you know, it asks for the date of work, and was that the date of work I did back in 2020, or I received, you know, my residual check in January? You know, what date how do I navigate that?
So really good question. Whenever you are we're talking about two different things, right? Whenever you're applying for unemployment, we always ask, when was your last day of physical work? That's one thing. Now, when we're talking about residual payments or any other payments that you might be receiving, there is always going to be a section in the application that says, what other type of payment are you currently receiving? If you know the date ranges, great. Now, the most important part, one of the most important aspects though, is after you actually file your unemployment insurance claim, you have to certify for benefits every 2 weeks. Question number 6 will ask you, have you received any wages for any work performed now? Now, at that point, you're going to just put the date that you received your payment. Whether you received it yourself, your agent received it for you, your corporation or your bank received it for you, you're going to put the date as best as you know it. If you're not quite sure and you're kind of guessing, that's okay. EDD will take your word for it as long as you report a date while you're receiving your benefits, and then EDD can determine, how they're going to affect you, because that could affect you, but you want to be truthful and honest with EDD about that always, right?
Okay, and sorry to be a little bit granular, but my agent gets it, right, on the 6th, and then there's the date of the check that was cut, and then there's the date I received it and I picked it up from my PO box. Which date, am I just reporting the date I received it from my PO box?
The
Is
date
that
you
the date I'm
received it or
reporting
as best as you know it.
Okay,
Correct. Like EDD is not going to ding you if it was like, oh, last Saturday and you just found out on Monday. We'll know that you did it as best as you could. You can
Okay.
always call in and you can always send an online message to clarify any information as well. If anything was missing or you submitted, and you can edit those after they've been submitted, but you can submit a message or call to clarify any information submitted on those forms.
okay, great. Also just wanted to highlight and make sure I'm understanding it correctly. Ken, you had mentioned that it was just under 17,000 is the annual income you're meeting to get the maximum weekly benefit. So if you're a freelancer, right, and you have lots and lots of jobs that total, 60,000, 50,000, they don't need to submit everything, right? They would just need to submit the total number of W-2s or 1099s to reach that maximum benefit. Is that right? Is that a correct understanding? Or the person should go through the process of submitting all of their W-2s? Because it could be a lot of people, a lot of employers in any given year.
So
Okay. Go ahead, Kush. Sorry.
yeah, no, they need to report all the employers.
They do. Okay.
They do. Remember, your employer is paying for your unemployment insurance benefit. So let's say if you have 12 of them, you only reported 2. Now those 2 are paying,
I see.
So you need to report because we see all of them on our side.
Okay.
We just want to make sure you guys are doing, reporting all of them. And if you don't, then it could create an issue. I'll just give you a small example. Let's say I worked for Microsoft and Apple, and I say, oh, you know what? I made 100,000 from Microsoft. I know I'm getting 450, and I stopped working for Microsoft, let's call it November of 2024. My last day work for Microsoft, November of 2024. Here, Apple reported last day work or still working, that becomes an issue. Hey, who's your last employer?
I see. Okay, wonderful. Okay, thanks for the specificity. So it is important to do the due diligence and upload everything that you can, right, in the time frame that you worked. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I think we're ready to move on to the next slide.
Before we do, can I just share a few words of wisdom in my experience working at the UI branch? Eligibility can be tricky, and everybody's circumstances are uniquely different. I always tell my customers now that I'm at Workforce Services to please apply. Don't second guess yourself or your employer. We are the UI branch are the experts, and they will go through a rigorous checks and balances to make sure that you are eligible to receive benefits. So even if you think you're not eligible, it doesn't cost a dime to apply. And we certainly would encourage it online, obviously, so we're not tying up a phone line, but we're willing to talk to you by phone or in person at one of the DRCs. And we do encourage everyone to please at least file, because you're not going to know until you do. And that's my number one word, number one point for words of wisdom.
That's
I
great.
also wanted
Another-
to, go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry, Ken, one other thing. Tell us, who sets the weekly rate for unemployment? There was a question about the lack of increase in that weekly rate for many of years. And so who sets that weekly rate?
Each state sets it,
The
because you'll
state.
notice like in a certain, like Massachusetts has a very high weekly benefit amount. Alabama has a very low one. And I don't have the answer, but I want to say it's the Congress.
The legislature of the state. So I just want to clarify, I've asked that as well, management, and on behalf of claimants, is there an increase? Is there any word? There is no talk, there is no conversation about that currently, unfortunately, but it is set by the state legislature. So you can lobby
Yes.
there with the state representative, the state senate or state assembly member of your area, be good conversation, absolutely. Mhm.
Thank you, Zulma. I knew it had to do with
Yeah, you're right, I'll
jumping through
point them.
hoops and getting it to move forward with
Correct.
a very high cost of living state.
Yeah.
The other thing too, I would share with you, if you do decide to go to one of our disaster recovery centers, or even if you want to, please bring any documentation that you received by EDD. That will help the agent determine kind of where you're at with your claim. And as I mentioned, we love to communicate with people, and there are some legal things that we have to tell you about, whether we want to put a stamp on something and mail it, because sometimes we are required to mail documents out. One thing I will share with you, if you are a gig worker and do not have W-2 wages, because the system first tries to get you a regular UI claim, you're going to get a disqualification notice saying you have been disqualified for a regular UI because you have no usable wages. But don't let that deter you, because the next day in the mail, you will get an award letter for the DUA program. So just want you to know, and if you do get a letter that's regarding your eligibility, it's not a death sentence to your claim. It just means, hey, EDD just wants a little more info so we can process your claim. I'd say probably like 80% of the letters we send out are just looking for clarifications. You indicated something on your claim form. Is this what you meant? Well, we do want to make sure that we apply the UI code fairly and consistently. And that's why you'll probably get, maybe a little email saying, hey, you said you didn't work during this week, but did you really work? Or, or more, the better example is you said you didn't look for work. But we know people are out there, they're going to the union hall, they're calling their agent, they're doing all these things behind the scenes, but for some reason, people have it in their heads that you have to have an interview for it to be considered looking for work. That is not the case. It's many, many different things. LinkedIn, it's even asking a friend or a former employer, hey, do you have any job openings for next week? So it's pretty easy to meet that requirement.
That's great. And Ken, we did have one other question, which was, so much of our work is paid through payroll companies.
Yes.
So somebody was curious, is the benefit for unemployment coming through the payroll company, or it's coming from it's the employer, right? The payroll company is just that. Well, anyway, you answer that. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I'll defer to my friends at UI, but
Okay.
the thing to remember with your payroll company, that is technically your employer when you're reporting those wages. Kush, go ahead and elaborate.
Yeah, that is correct. So your payroll company becomes your employer. So let's say you work for Paramount and you're getting a paycheck through a payroll company. Technically, that payroll company is your employer. So when you're filing for that application, you're going to not list that Paramount. You might list, let's say, Entertainment Partners or CAPS, or they will be the one who will be your employer, and technically your employer pays in for your unemployment insurance. On the back end, I don't know what kind of, contract they have with Paramount, to say as example. That's, but that payroll company becomes your employer, and that's who you want to list on your application.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Fantastic question. Okay.
One more thing, going back to Ken, what he was saying, disqualification and stuff. Remember, guys, if it comes down to where you are truly disqualified, a few things. You always have a right to file an appeal if you do not agree with all or part of that decision. Second, because of the DUA, we are in that disaster right now. Even let's say for some reason, you're disqualified, you could still be potentially eligible for a DUA. So if you have a current claim, let's say it's not exhausted, you have a disqualification, file for another claim and mark it on there like Ken said, you're affected by disasters. You could be potentially eligible for a DUA claim. Sometimes you get into those false statement week penalty, you know, where maybe you made a genuine mistake or something that you did not reported those wages from a different employer, or like residual you were talking, Tina, those are considered deductible earnings. You don't report it, your employer reported it, you got a disqualification wages deductible decision. We call it false statement week penalty. If that's there, you can still potentially be eligible for a DUA claim. So don't let that hold you that, oh, I got a disqualification. These are different circumstances here. We're dealing with a disaster, and so you potentially could be eligible for a DUA claim. So please apply if you have that kind of situation. And again, it goes by case, but I thought I should brought it out. So I don't want somebody to be like, you know what, I know I have a disqualification. You could still be potentially eligible for a DUA claim.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And just to highlight, right, a job was postponed or canceled because of the fire. That that might qualify you for DUA. You should be applying. Great. And then I know, Kush and Zulma, you're just seeing so many applications. I just want to, before we end this section, I didn't know if there was any tips or traps that you see as common errors that sort of make claims get stuck in some hiccups. Are there any common tips or traps you see?
I would advise one item that is, it seems optional when the application asks you for your last 18 months of wages. So the unemployment insurance application, whether it's online, by telephone, fax, or by mail, you do have to state your last 18 months of wages. So what I do see when we receive the applications online or by mail, sometimes it's not listed on there who you last worked for. And yes, you can bypass that by putting, you know, other things, but we want to know your wage information so that we can determine what your highest amount per week will be. So that's one of the pitfalls I would say, please avoid on your application. Put as much information as you can about your last employers as best as you recall. If you don't remember all of them, as best as you can, I know because there might be a lot, but only in the last 18 months. So please remember that as well. And the dates are always listed if you're doing the application online, but that would help a lot, especially also in the case of the disaster and employment assistance claim. I know it seems like, well, I don't even know if I qualify, but I have these 1099 wages that we want those. We want to know that information. Why? Because you can potentially qualify more per week. Otherwise, you're going to be receiving a minimum amount per week. And unless you contact EDD and then provide that information, yes, EDD might still ask you for that information later on, but if you can include on your application, why not? So we can just start off on a good note, right? And just give you the best and then go forward from there.
That's wonderful. Thank you. So it sounds like such a big nod, right? To be trying to stay organized, right? Maybe to be, however you're organizing your work through the year, to really be creating that system for you and trying to stay organized.
I think because we're now in tax season, Tina, that a lot of people have gathered this information already.
Yes.
And we'll go into some additional tips later on about, you know, when you file a claim, make sure that you have as much information available when you start. You know, have that the MyEDD account set up in advance before you go in to apply for UI. That'll only help expedite the process.
And if
Wonderful.
I could add on really quickly, something that I would just say, well, where do I find this information? If you have your W-2s, great. Your 1099s, great. If you don't have that for whatever reason, you have your bank statements, perfect. You have just an estimate, you're like thinking it might have been this amount, put it as best as you can, recall, and then we can always justify it if needed.
Thank you.
You know, one more thing, you know, I know we talked about several times, is let's say if you're not sure, you know, are you affected by truly a disaster or not? Stated on the application, especially, you know, who are self-employed, you know, claimants who are self-employed. If you're not truly sure, stated on the application you are affected by a disaster, that information, why is that important? Because if you're self-employed, meaning you don't have no bona fide wages, and you say you are not affected by disaster, Your claim stops right there. It's an invalid claim because you don't have no bona fide. Your information does not get forwarded to other offices because you already stated you're not affected by a disaster. So if you're not sure, say you are, let us investigate. Truly, are you affected? That gives you a potential chance, because sometimes, like you mentioned, Tina, they're not sure. They don't live in a fire area. Maybe the employer even is in fire area, but you still got to go through that PCH.
Great.
Those are road closures. You're affected.
Yeah.
Let the
Yeah, those are the-
department do that investigation. All you're doing is just put yes and put that fire. If you can, instead of just stating LA fire, you were asking for the tips, state that, hey, I'm affected by this fire if you can.
Okay.
Another thing, if you guys can, when you file a claim, don't assume, no, I'm following up. Call the number. Once again, 8 a.m. is a good time to call. Take that call. You're the very first ones. Talk to a representative, get an update, go by your day.
Great.
know,
Okay.
So you
And just to
you
offer a clarification, when the term bona fide wages is used, it really means W-2 wages. They're
Okay.
interchangeable.
And I'm sorry, there's just such good questions that keep coming in, but I think this one might apply to many people, so I'm going to sneak it in. So for people that are currently collecting unemployment and that claim is going to end right after the deadline to apply for DUA, what happens to those folks, right? So should they go in now before the deadline and apply for DUA?
So if they're collecting unemployment, they already have a regular UI claim. Now, again, we're going back to that July 12th deadline. So let's say if their claim ends after July 12th, right? The balance or they exhaust after July 12th, then they cannot file a DUA.
Okay.
Can they file a DUA now? They can submit an application. We're going to reject that application, letting them know that you already have a regular claim on file. That claim is reopened. Please certify for benefits. Another thing could happen. They have a regular claim. It most likely possibly can end before July 12th. Then they need to apply for, or what happens is their information, that DR number I was telling you about, we have it in our system. The system pulls it up. Hey, this claimant was affected by a disaster. This claim is exhausted. Let's send them possibly a notice and see if this claimant could be eligible for a potential DUA claim. But
Okay.
anything after July 12th, as of right now, no DUA after July 12th.
And just to remind folks, we're in a very fluid situation here. So these dates that we're giving you can change. We have a wonderful EDD newsroom on our website that has all the latest updates. So we're going to cover some of the online resources later, but I wanted to get that plug in now because we really want you to not only be well informed as of today, but we want to keep you well informed throughout this whole recovery period. So I know we're
Wonderful.
getting down to
Okay.
the last 20 minutes of the webinar,
Yes.
so I'll do my
So
best to
Yes.
move on and get us moving forward with disability insurance and paid
Yes,
family
thank you.
leave. But before we do, I just want to kind of remind folks that after you apply, as I mentioned before, we'd love to communicate to our customers. So you're going to get updates by mail, text, or even email. So we do ask kindly that you reply quickly to any messages. That helps us get your benefits to you faster. Keep in mind, you have to certify for benefits every 2 weeks, and you can do that online, by phone, or by mail. And be sure when you're signing up for the programs that we offer that you indicate how you want us to pay you. Obviously, direct deposit is the fastest. The debit card, we have to mail it to your home. And we know that a lot of folks maybe they may have had to move out of their residential address, and maybe they have a post office box or a mailing address. That's fine. On the application, they'll always ask you for your residential address, which is where you reside or resided. And then where you want your mail to go is the mailing address. So just make sure you know the difference between the two. All right, so after you've applied, now we're going into disability. And this program is designed for folks that have W-2 wages. It's support when you're not able to work due to a non-work related illness, injury, pregnancy, or childbirth. If it's work-related, then you want to go into a workers' comp situation, which is something we do not deal with at EDD. The partial wage replacement is 70% to 90% for eligible California workers. The interesting thing about disability is you guys pay in, the W-2 wage earners pay into the program. Therefore, it's not considered a benefit and is not taxed at the state or federal level. Again, we highly encourage you to use the online disability insurance calculator because those weekly benefits range from $50 minimum up to $16.81. And to qualify for the highest level, your highest quarterly earnings during the last 4 to 5 completed quarters must exceed $31,200. And disability is different from UI in that it's good for up to 52 weeks, providing you're under medical practitioner's care and you are certified for that period of time. On a side note, I just wanted to add a little plug-in for folks that might be small business owners, entrepreneurs, or the self-employed, even independent contractors. Little known fact, EDD has an optional disability insurance program called Disability Insurance Elective Coverage. And the premiums are based on your net profit. So if that's something you're interested in, I would refer you to our website for more information. But I know a lot of the folks out there have private policies, say through Aflac or New York Life, places like that. But EDD does offer for those that are interested that normally the gig workers specifically and small business owners, the option of having they call it self-insured disability. Okay, so with disabilities, some things to be aware of. You pay into it, as I mentioned. This one has a 7-day waiting period. It's unpaid, by the way. The golden rule is you can't double dip, meaning you can't get disability and unemployment at the same time. And the real key here is you must be under the care of a licensed healthcare provider. That could be a chiropractor, it could be your PCP, it could be a psychiatrist. There are a lot of different categories that fall under that general broad term. The same way you apply is by having a MyEDD account. Rather than selecting UI online, you go to SDI online. Voila, you go. Here's where I want you to listen up and pay some attention. Citizenship or immigration status does not affect eligibility. So that's different from UI as we spoke about earlier. Okay, moving on to the next slide. Paid family leave. This is a great program, as I mentioned, one of the first state in the nation to offer this over 20 years ago. It's really designed for those life-changing events like the birth of a child or maybe an ill parent, that we all get old and we all have issues. Our parents get older and they need care sometimes. It's also there to support a military family member's deployment overseas. Again, the partial replacement here is 70% to 90% for eligible workers. Just so that you guys know, the higher percentage levels apply to the lower wage earners, okay? So if you have a higher amount, if you're one of the higher wage earners based on W-2 wages, then you would receive a lower amount of that 70–90% threshold. So that's paid family leave in a nutshell. As I mentioned, you still pay into, because it's a component of state disability insurance program, you pay into it. There is no waiting period for PFL, unlike disability. Again, you can't triple dip. You can't have UI, DI, and PFL at the same time. The threshold or the weekly benefit amounts are the same range, $50 to $16.81 per week. And again, citizenship or immigration status does not affect your eligibility. And please forgive me if I'm going a little rapidly here. I know I want to be respectful of everyone's time today. So again, you would apply, there's only 2 really ways to apply for disability. MyEDD, which is online using the SDI online system, or by mail. We also mentioned that we have disability representatives at the disaster recovery centers, that during the specified period of time, you can file in person, but only at those centers. Not at one of their offices, but only at one of the DRCs. Okay, so most importantly, guys, I know that you're also, LA is a big county, and I had my trials and tribulations with the 405 yesterday and today. So we want to make finding help easy for you. Online is a great resource, but we do have 2 disaster recovery centers that are currently slated to be open through the 10th of March. And they are located in Altadena and West Los Angeles at the former Westside Pavilion Shopping Center. It's now called the UCLA West Research Center, by the way. And this is really your one-stop shop for everything. You have FEMA, you have the the county registrar's office. You've got all sorts of resources all in one location for you. And on the screen, you'll see their addresses. They are open daily, including weekends and holidays, from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. And they also have community-based organizations there, like the Red Cross. You have SoCal Edison is there to help people that might need assistance with their utilities bills. So it's really a great place to go. And I would encourage you, if you have the time, to please stop by. You can buy our desk if you want and say hello, even if you filed your claim online. But we always welcome people daily from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. That's those 2 centers. The other thing I did want to cover with you is our impacted worker and family assistance centers. We have 4 in Los Angeles County. The newest one opened just yesterday. There was a media event at our America's Job Center of California in Culver City on Sepulveda Boulevard. And this is the latest location. And for all additional details, there's something in the chat pod that'll give you more detail on this, as well as address information. But they have 4 core services they offer. Number 1 are family services. So that gives you access to food, transportation, tax preparation, and other basic needs. There's also referrals to immigration services. They also, for employment services, they'll go in and talk to you about, well, okay, do you want to maybe retrain, or do you want to upskill your job knowledge so that you can maybe get a higher level position? And they do provide up to $2,000 in relief funds. Youth services, which is really important. This helps our youth find part-time employment and also provides them guidance on accessing mental health services, which is so very important during any sort of traumatic event in anyone's life. And lastly, for our small business services, they have a financial advisor there, and they have micro grants in the amount of $2,000 up to $25,000. So there you have it. Those are called impacted worker and family assistance centers. And these are the 4, then they have 4 locations in Los Angeles County. So next slide, we're going to talk about where Caesar and I work. These are the America's Job Centers of California. We have almost 200 of these throughout the state, and some have more comprehensive services than others, but this really is a one-stop shop for no-cost job and training services. What we primarily do is we look to help people find work and sometimes counsel them on maybe a new career path using our labor market information tools that are part of the EDD umbrella of services. We help people brush up on their interviewing skills. We help them with their resumes. We connect them to our workforce development partners who have great information on grants, trainings, and apprenticeship opportunities. And as you know, we're getting ready for the Olympics coming up in 2028. And there's some really good apprenticeship opportunities for construction right now. We also conduct job fairs and other job matching services. And we know that when you've lost your home, you've probably lost just about everything. So we do have computers that are free of charge to use. We have fax machine and phones. So if you need any assistance, this is also a good place to stop by. As I mentioned earlier, the one in Culver City on Sepulveda near Jefferson is only about 10 minutes down the road from the West Los Angeles Disaster Recovery Center. So that's really close. But if you want to find the one nearest your home, just go to the EDD office locator page on our website, type in your city or your zip code, and up will come different locations for you to go to, along with their business hours. So those are the AJCCs. We also wanted to mention that EDD has issued 2 grants in the amount of $20 million, and they're basically parsed into 2 different pieces. there is a $10 million grant from the U.S. Department of Labor that's coordinated by the Los Angeles County and the City of Los Angeles for humanitarian aid, cleanup efforts, and temporary jobs. Separate of that is another $10 million grant. This is to the Los Angeles County Department of Economic Opportunity. And this is for transitional jobs, on-the-job training, other workforce services that support long-term recovery in the community, and also helping people find meaningful careers in the Los Angeles region. I just wanted to communicate that. As far as online resources, there's so much out there, folks. I mean, I know you know how to use a search engine, but edd.ca.gov is where life begins for EDD staff and customers. We have tons of helpful videos on how to apply for benefits, report industry earnings like residuals and royalties, how to set up, how to interact with the ID.me folks. And there's also a handout in the chat pod on step-by-step instructions on how to set that ID.me up with the state of California. There's the official state of California website. All of these are on a handout in the chat pod. So I'm not going to go into them each individual one, but I do want you to be aware that there's a lot out there, folks. So please take advantage of that. And please use the internet as your secret weapon to find information. Now we're getting toward the end of our presentation here, and we do have one ask of our audience today. We really, number one, appreciate you taking the time to be with us. That means a lot to us. It's not often we get an opportunity to speak to hundreds of people at one time, but we do value your participation today. We are asking you if this would be something you could help us with. On our website, we have an LA media toolkit, a social media toolkit that you can just take links and upload them to your Facebook page, your YouTube channel, your LinkedIn, or what have you. And this helps get out the word about the services that EDD offers, as well as any updates from the county and city. And I know the link is a long one, so I believe it's in the chat pod as well. But this is for folks that might just want to spread the word, and without having to physically repeat it to your friends and coworkers, you can just, hey, put it on your Facebook page. So that brings us to the conclusion of my portion. I'm going to turn this back over to Tina for any parting words, or we have a few moments left, I guess.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ken. We did have a question about the locations of the new Family Assist Service Centers.
Yes.
And I know you had sent me the one sheet. I know we'll include it in our follow-up, but do you happen to have the link for that, or we could?
I don't.
Okay.
I had a hard time actually finding it on the internet, but
Okay.
because we had the grand opening, I just took the flyers and put them
Okay.
there into the chat pod. Sorry.
All right, well, that's okay. We'll make sure that we include those addresses in our follow-up email with everybody. As you can see, everybody, there are so many things popping up in the chat. There's a lot to look at. We also will try, I know there's, 5 or 6 questions that we're not going to have time. Let's see, maybe we could do a couple more. Maybe we'll try to are you guys okay? Can we fill in just a couple more questions that people have? It's sort of just about people trying to apply and understand how to do the best job. So one question was, if the payroll company has a PO box and it's asking for the specific address, is a PO box acceptable if that's what's on the check?
Absolutely. If a PO box is the only address available, that's acceptable. If you have the PO box and a physical address, wonderful. If you have just the physical address, that's okay too. As best as you can provide, please. And searching online is valid too.
Great. And so if you could just share with us a little bit, it sounds like some of us may need a refresher on, if I work, when I recertify and I work a certain amount of days in any given week, does that cancel my benefit? So can you just speak a little bit about that process, right, of recertifying, sharing income earned, and what that does to the benefit?
So let's say if you're certifying for benefits and you were eligible to certify on February 16th, what that means is you're certifying for the past 2 weeks. So you're certifying from February 2nd to February 8th. You certify most of the time, you're certifying for 2 weeks. February 2nd to February 8th, that's your first week. February 9th to February 15th is your second week. So when you're certifying your first week, I'm going to go a little faster, I know, but we are okay. Just so you know, Tina, we can stay as long as you want to help them out and answer all questions if you guys
Thank
are
you.
okay. So let's say if you worked that first week and your last day work was February 6th, and you're certifying for that first week, and in that week you earn $300. Just so you know, guys, I'm going to give, so let's, as an example, for each weekly benefit amount, there is a thing called excessive earning. For a weekly benefit amount of $450, excessive earning amount is $600. What means is if you made any given week, you made $600 or more, don't expect even $1 of your unemployment insurance benefit come your way. Now, going back to, let's say between February 2nd and 8th, your last day work was February 6th, you earn $300. You need to report that on your certification form. For that week, your last day work becomes February 6th. Do not expect the complete 450 come your way. It will be reduced, and whatever you are owed, you will be given. Now you're certifying the second week that same time. Once you're certifying for that February 9th to February 15th, let's say your last day work in that week was February 14th. So when you're certifying for that week, your February 14th becomes your last day work for that week. And if you earn $250, you report that, and then the system will calculate and gives you what you are owed.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
And just as a point of clarification, if you are an independent contractor or self-employed, you report your net earnings. And what that means is you can take deductions that are allowable by the IRS, like your prorated rent, your phones, whatever your tools of the trade cost you, and subtract those from what you actually take in, and you report net earnings. Whereas for our W-2 wage earners, they must report their gross earnings, which includes tax, which is the pre-tax amount.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We have a couple of questions. Seems like people are currently on a claim and feeling two things. People are on a claim and they're realizing that their traditional unemployment weekly benefit is less than if they're going to apply for DUA because they can use that combination of their 1099. Right. So they're wondering, again, like what to do.
Great question.
What to do.
Right. I can see if you have both earnings, you're not really quite sure, both. Include both and let EDD actually compile both if possible. What will happen is the claimant in any given situation will never have the opportunity to decide whether they want a regular claim or a disaster unemployment assistance claim. The thing is that there are guidelines and legislation in place that dictate that we have to use the regular unemployment insurance claim. If that's all used and exhausted, then at that point, the department can actually file the disaster unemployment assistance claim. And unfortunately, even though the amount I know may vary, of course, we saw the baselines, right? They vary from one claim to another. We are bound by law to use the regular claim that's valid. But you can always contact the department to see if there's any criteria that may be met so we can determine if there's maybe a possibility for a disaster or if there's any other program that may later down the line become available where we can actually put them, because there has been in the past such a case where we can actually put them on a claim that they would get the highest amount per week, but EDD has to determine that. And you can always please contact EDD if you have any question about that, whether you might qualify or not. Don't remain with that doubt. Call us. We're there for you Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and online as well. It's a really good idea. It'll be my best bit of advice for each claimant. Please don't ever have a question, ask EDD.
Okay, thank you. And kind of in that same vein, it feels like there's some folks that are on a traditional claim right now. And just again, I know you already clarified it, but they're on a traditional claim. They're not sure what to do, that they want to file a DU claim, disaster unemployment claim, but do they have to wait for their traditional claim to fully be exhausted before they would be eligible for the DU claim? And if that's the case, Kush, I know you answered this before, they have until July 12th. So if their traditional claim would be exhausted, let's say in May of May of 2025. But they can't apply for, they missed the deadline to apply for disaster unemployment, right? Because that's March 10th. Do they apply for, like, do they do a new claim now? Or there's just a lot of curiosity about what to do in that that overlap.
So they will have to wait for that claim to get exhausted, and then they will file for a new claim, potentially DUA, and exceptions are there. That March
Okay.
10th is there, but remember, when they're filing this claim, right, or they're certifying, call it in, let us know that, hey, I am affected by a disaster, Eden Fire, Palisades Fire. We're going to activate the DR number.
Okay.
Remember, I told you, so that DR number tells us that, hey, this claim was on a regular claim. This claim now got exhausted in May of 2025. This claimant is affected by a disaster, could be potentially eligible for a DUA claim.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's very clear. Okay, everybody, it is 1:33. Thank you so much to all of you. We really appreciate your knowledge and your time. I am going to welcome back Keith McNutt just to wrap it up for us and to close us out. So thanks so much, everybody from EDD. And Keith, I'll toss it to you.
Thanks, Tina. I just want to add all of our thanks on behalf of the Entertainment Community Fund and the Coalition to Ken, Kush, Zoma, and Cesar for so much wonderful information. This has been so helpful to our community. And also want to thank our wonderful coalition partners for helping us put all of this together. In that spirit, to everybody online, you're getting simultaneous news with our partners because we just got confirmation of the next of these webinars on March 5th. It will be with an amazing legal resource called Public Counsel, which is going to spend the seminar time talking about tenants' rights. So please join us for that. Look to all of the partners that you've been hearing about these webinars from. We'll get that information out to them as soon as possible. And we will get you the invites for the next event on March 5th. So thank you for attending, and we hope this was helpful, and we look forward to continuing to provide this kind of information as we go forward.